I guess we're live. I got caught off guard. Here I was doing something. Milo, did you see that? Yeah, that's as much excitement as you'll see. The only time he gets excited is when I come home from a trip or we get to go for a run or something. Then he's excited. But today we're going to talk about, first of all, getting your projects done. I got some stuff done on my project. I got some painting done. Now it has seemed to have stopped raining. I'm hoping it warms up today and the sun's out so I can get the block out, maybe get that painted, get the oil pan painted and the front cover, get some, nice orange, Chevy orange paint on that thing, get it going. I'd like to get this stuff painted before it gets to be winter because I don't want to paint in the winter unless I have a heated paint booth. And by that, I mean like a space heater in my garage aimed at the motor and get that painted. But I want to get it painted so I can get the short block and stuff assembled. I want to get that. I'd like to get the 396 tested and, assembled and tested. It would be very cool. But today we're talking about cooling. We're talking about charge cooling. If you look at the photo, I have an air-to-air intercooler that we ran. This was from the guys at ProCharger. I've done a few different tests on it. I ran it as a nice, got a nice splinter. I got a nice air-to-air intercooler that we ran on turbos, and we also ran it on the centrifugal supercharger because it came with one of the air-to-air kits. And I have a video up where I did a comparison between. We did an intercooler upgrade. Basically, we did the higher flow version of the intercooler. I showed you what happened there. We definitely did pick up power. We picked up. We dropped boost and picked up power and picked up cooling because it was a thicker core with larger tanks on it and bigger inlets and outlets, and that worked fairly well. But one of the tests that I did when we were doing the air-to-air intercooler is you can see this was from the guys at Nitrous Express who do great stuff over there. They sent out one of these cooling rings that you attach to the air-to-air intercooler so that you can, so that you can run nitrous through it. And obviously nitrous, very, very cold, negative 129 degrees of negative 129 degree boiling point, basically. So it changes from the liquid nitrous that we have in the tank to a gas. And as it does, it obviously cools things off. So what you do is that intercooler ring has a bunch of holes drilled in it that are at an angle. And so they spray into the intercooler core. Here are some of the problems with running nitrous, and the guys recently, I did this test long ago, but the guys from Engine Masters recently did a test on this also with their air-to-air setup, and I basically got the same kind of results that I did. I think I would suspect. What you're trying to do is the intercooler itself obviously lowers the charge temperature. So normally you're using ambient air, whatever that is. 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees. If it's really, really cold outside, the air-to-air intercoolers work really well. But you have heated charge air. So it's ambient air going into the turbo or above ambient air if you're foolish enough just to have an open turbo under the hood where it's going to be very hot because all the air coming through the radiator. So you have the air going into the turbo compresses that. You have, based on how much boost you're running, you have an even more elevated charge temperature, and then you run it through the intercooler cools that off, and that's better for the motor. You're less likely to detonate. It makes more power, yada, yada, yada. So we were trying to cool the air off, and the intercooler works very well to do that. So, which is why I always recommend, yes, have an intercooler. Even on, I know guys want to run them. Well, I'm running 85. I don't need an intercooler. Yes, an intercooler is definitely better. I'm running methanol. I don't need it. Well, it makes more power if you do have an intercooler, especially like on the M1 and E85 guys. If you're running the boost way up, then an intercooler, the more boost that you run, the more an intercooler helps. So it's a good idea. But we're trying to get it to be even cooler with the intercooler by running negative 129 degrees through the air-to-air portion of this and hopefully cool the stuff that's inside. Here are the problems that you have. One of them is that when you're running nitrous, if you're using nitrous, it's expensive, but now even more so than it used to be. It's expensive to use. So you could use CO2, and it's there's a little bit less cooling, but still it's in the negative number, so it's very, very cold. But if you use nitrous, you have to make sure that when you're injecting the nitrous, that the nitrous then isn't getting drawn in by the turbo. which, by the way, if you run nitrous into the turbo, then really good things will happen, irrespective of the cooling. Nitrous itself, and I've shown this in the video, nitrous is not a very good intercooler by itself. You just don't ever have enough of the nitrous in the system to do lots of charge cooling, but it still works really, really well. It still adds lots of power with nitrous, always does. And then, like in my case, when we did it, it went beyond the wastegate control a little bit and added more power, because it also added more boost. So on a 100 shot, we got way more than 100 horsepower gain. So that it does work in that sense. But so you want to make sure that if you're injecting nitrous like we were with this thing, one, it's expensive, so use CO2, and two, that you don't get it going into the motor. If you get it going into the motor, it's definitely going to add power, but that has nothing to do with the cooling effect. So the next thing is, if you're using a gas like CO2, you also don't want to get that into the motor, because that will take power away. So you have to make sure that wherever this is positioned, it doesn't have access to getting back into the motor. But then the question becomes, okay, as a cooling, how effective is it at cooling? How effective is it at additional cooling? So we need to look at the situation here. We have, let's say we have 250 degree air coming out of our turbo because we're running relatively high boost, and then it's going through the intercooler core. The intercooler core is being cooled off by ambient air. Let's say our ambient air is 80 or 90 degrees. Let's say we're doing this in the summer. And then we would drop, at least 100 degrees or more out of the charge air, probably more like 110 or 120 degrees. Out of that, we could bring our temperature down to near 100, but somewhere between 100 and 150, let's say, depending on how efficient all of these things are. So we're taking a big chunk of the heat out of the air with just the intercooler. A lot of times we when we do this testing, we normally get it to between 100 and 120. Where I'm using extremes here, but if we can get the charge air, we can get most of the charge air out of it with the intercooler. You can never bring the air temperature down to ambient. I know I've had people tell me, oh yeah, I have an air-to-air intercooler, and when I'm driving around, I bring the air temperature below ambient. I'm like, so how are you going to have something that's hot, cooling with something that's one temperature, and then make it less than that temperature? I said, you don't really understand what you're saying there. That's not accurate. That's not thermodynamically possible. Oh no, it does. It's super efficient. No, it's not that efficient. It's not 200 or 300% efficient. It just can't be. But so what we're trying to do is get even more cooling with the CO2. The problem is, when I tested it, I was using nitrous. We made sure that we're not getting nitrous into the motor, so we don't see power gains. We didn't see a big power gain using this. We also didn't see a big change in cooling with this. So even though it's 129 degrees, it's going through the core. It's cooling the core off while we're doing this, because the one thing you can do that helps the situation is you can pre-cool the intercooler. So you can spray a whole bunch on there and then make the run. And then while you're making the run, also spray it on there. So you're trying to maximize the coldness of this setup, having it cold to begin with. And then so the hot air hits a cold heat, a super cooled heat exchanger. And then to try to keep it that way, you keep pushing this stuff through there. But the change in temperature from the intercooler being, ambient or kind of cold to being very cold, the change in total charge temperature drop was not very much. I think we saw a 25 or 30 degree change in temperature with and without this thing. And I need to look that up. It might not even have been that much. And we saw very, very little power change when we did this. Let me see here. I'm going to go look at my intercooler ring video, or my testing here. This was on a cathedral port in turbo. I'm thinking it's probably like this one. That's the exhaust test we're taking a look at. That's 478. Oh, here we go. Here's the nitrous. No, that's the nitrous by itself. Air to air, air to water, air to air intercooler, and the NX. So here we go. Fluid and air temps. Yeah, actually less than that. So we're down to 123 degrees there. Yeah, actually very little. I misspoke. It's not 20 or 30 degrees. It's more like 8 or 9 degrees. So it's not very much. So we didn't get a big change in charge cooling from using this system. Maybe we might see there may be a benefit from this kind of thing by in repeatability, or the dreaded heat soak that everybody talks about. So it may change the temperature back to near ambient, let's say, when you're driving around, although driving around tends to do that with lots of airflow. So this as a secondary cooling mechanism was just not very effective in this test. And I haven't seen or talked to anybody that's used this very successfully. And I haven't ever seen this kind of combination where you're running, maybe if we, and one of the thing that I wanted to do is basically immerse the air to air intercooler in like liquid nitrogen or something that's very, very cold, and where it never dissipates or goes anywhere else, where it's constantly that cold. And I think that would work very well, although that would be very difficult to do. And if you're doing that, you might as well just do an air to water intercooler with ice water or something like that to get the cold air, to get the air even colder. And ice water in an air to water intercooler so far is the best thing that I've tested for getting the charge air down. When you run a turbo with an intercooler, and then because I've tested the air to water and air to air, and if you're using the ambient water for the air to water intercooler, and you're using ambient air for the air to air, the gains that you get from those would be very comparable, as long as the flow rates between the cores were very similar. You don't have big pressure drops or flow drops. So that works very well. But when you add ice water to the system, if you've ever done that, and if you ever tested that with the turbo combination, the turbo motor gets really, really happy. It really likes. I always like doing that. What are you doing, Milo? I always liked the intercooler testing that I was doing when we were doing the Bonneville stuff, because we would run ice water on all the Bonneville motors. And when you'd run the ice water, because it would definitely make a difference on power, it definitely make a difference in the tune. So we did a lot of testing with just the air to water system running the way that it was, to get the motor kind of close and dialed in. And then we would put the ice water in it, and then we go, oh yeah, it wants a lot more fuel now because it's making a lot more power. It really, really likes that. And so that's the best setup I've run, is ice water with the air to water, better than this setup you're looking at with running cold gas through the air to water intercooler or air to air intercooler. It just didn't seem to get the gains that I was hoping that it would, because I thought, negative 129, man, we could get this charge temperature down to 0. We'd be really doing something. We could get it even colder than you can with, a 32 degree transfer medium with ice water, but that's just not the case. It just didn't happen like that. And as much as I wanted it to. So let's see what you guys are doing with your projects and what's going on. Have you ever used an intercooler or a killer chiller, and would be worth it for my? What is the killer chiller? Is that the pre-cooler thing? And I have used intercoolers on O3 Cobras. Use acetone and ethanol cooled by dry ice. Get the fluid down to negative 50, or a 70-30% glycol mix to get to negative 35 with dry ice. I didn't think dry ice was very good for that, but maybe with a different fluid it is. It's terrible with water. Are turbos best kept close to the exhaust valve versus far away remote mounts? No, one of those isn't really as an absolute better than others. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. The intercooler does, or the nitrous does work very well as a power adder, though. In your testing with turbos, have you seen a difference in IATs and power when using a TBI EFI system? Yes, it would be the same as a blow through. You'll get additional charge cooling by blowing through the fuel like you do with a carburetor. But I still would also recommend, as I've said, I'd still also recommend an intercooler. Are you going to test NA upgrades to the 8.1? Yeah, cam, probably heads, and I have a couple of intake manifolds. Roads are slick down here, low 50s in Indiana. It's in the 50s right now here too. I just watched the Intec 5.4 twin turbo versus the 5.3 twin turbo. Twin turbos make everything better. And with twins, it makes it twice as better. I'm building a 462 valve and cut down a truck intake to adapt to the M122 from the STSV. Got one at the bottom of the market. Paid $375. Good. Before that Holdner guy ruined that market completely, right? What is somebody explain to me what a killer chiller is? Is that the pre-cooling thing that they're talking about? I guess I can look it up, right? Heat exchangers. Let's see. Killer chiller system measuring intercooler fluid temperature on O3 Cobra outside temps from the mid 80s. In this video, the KC used 2 degrees Fahrenheit intercooler fluid temps. Obviously, the proper antifreeze mixes. So, what are they doing to do that? Knowing that in forced induction application, the prime enemy is severe heat soaking. And that hot air means less oxygen molecules. Let's see. So somebody tell me why don't they tell me what it is? Oh, it's a thermoelectric chiller system for these vehicles. Compressor-driven AC system were able to solve the power requirement problem, knowing that AC technology is much more efficient compared to 10 or 20 years ago. Let's see. Demonstrating the new standalone. Cool. I haven't obviously ever tested that. Yes, it uses AC to cool down the charger. Got to put it inside the cooler. Have you tested wrapping intercool piping in heat resistant materials? That's probably not going to do anything. Richard, I have a stock LY6. I'm about to put it in a Nova. Rear end's a 411, turbo 400, 3500 stall. I ordered a truck Norris cam. Now I doubt my choice is too small. You think your choice is too small for that? It depends on what you're trying to do with it. Are you wanting like just good average power production? Or are you wanting to make like lots of power? There are obviously lots more powerful camshafts than that. The Truck Norris is one that I recommend more for daily driver stuff. For the guy that wants a daily driver but more power and is more concerned about stock converter use, especially on a 6-liter, you could run it with a stock converter. That's a lot of converter. You could put a lot more camshaft in that, especially with that gear. Have you ever tested engine coolant temps on affecting horsepower torque? Yes, lots and lots of times. The ideal situation for power on temperature is cold water but hot oil. And it suppresses detonation as well. Marty, everyone was just talking about using the vehicle's AC system. That's what that interchiller setup is. And the factory has done that already. Dodge has done that. Yeah, we're not even at 50% on the likes, yo. Come on. What about the Cryo 2 system from DE? I'm not familiar with that. I guess I'm out of the loop. Yeah, that's the sprayer kit, right? That's the one that I have. That's like the one that I have the photo of. That's the intercooler ring. That proved itself to not work very well. Building an LQ4 and considering the Truck Norris NSR since it's so close to original, but that would be a mistake if it's going to add a turbo next year. Does a turbo affect spring required? No, you can still run it with stock springs. I would recommend a spring upgrade if we're going to be running lots of boost. I haven't yet done a test to find out where we run into boost related like valve float. Mostly because I haven't turned up. I've run boost on lots of stock spring stuff, but I haven't found I haven't ever run enough boost to get into valve float based on pressure. So I don't know where that is. Before you clean the 4.8, you should run water or methanol injection, see if it cleans the ports at all. It would be interesting to see. I don't know how much of that I have to. It would definitely clean up the because most of the cleaning happens in the combustion chamber. That all gets very, very clean. It works very well. So the combustion chamber and the piston tops will definitely be cleaned. I just don't know on the flow through how much of it, and I'm not sure how much I want that stuff being taken off and and have it go through the valves and into the combustion chamber. I just pulled apart an LS3 crate motor and was surprised at the factory ring gap. It measured 6,000s. I've never seen anything. Are you sure about that? Are you sure you're measuring that correctly? That seems, I've never seen anything that tight. Usually it's in the teens. Twin turbo, the 688 Kawasaki Vulcan sounds good. Bigfoot's in the house. Why do E85 blow-throughs need heat in the motor? I've seen that on the I've seen that more on the methanol motors. I know when we were running Mahovitz's, he had a methanol motor. I think it was one of the supercharged 5.4s or 5.8s, and it was running on methanol. And it didn't work unless you had a certain amount of heat in it, unless the water temperature was, I think, at 140 or 150 degrees was kind of the minimum, if I remember right. It didn't want to run very well unless it had heat in it. Oil coolers. I'm thinking about adding one to the Turbo Spirit. Pros and cons of this idea. Oil coolers are a good idea. It is as long as what you're trying to do is regulate oil temperature over sustained runs, because it doesn't do very much when you're driving around town, and it doesn't do anything on the freeway really, because you don't have a lot of load and you're not putting a lot of oil temperature in it. Lazy Hound, my AC is electric. Yeah, what kind of, is it a BMW or something, or a Mercedes? What is it? I think obviously they've proven that the gains that they're getting, the people are getting from their systems, and like what Dodge is doing, the power gain that they're getting from the cooling is more than the loss that you would get from driving the compressor. Because I don't think that the load imposed on the compressor is going to be any more than you using your AC system. Although I would hope that most guys going down the track don't have their AC on. Only have 5 minutes to watch, but Getaway, that's a good 5 minutes, all right? It's not quantity, it's quality. Michael, contrary to popular belief, I'm actually not a pecan expert. So I do like them and I recommend them, but I don't know which one you'd use for your stock bottom end build. I'm thinking maybe that's piston. Absolutely positive on ring gap. I calculated 22 should be where it needs to be for the twin setup I'm setting it up for. Okay. But what's the bore size? Is it 3.5 or something? Building a 5.3 for a C10 Chuck Norris cam Trailblazer SS intake with throttle body injectors would work. Well, the throttle body and injectors, the injector is going to be sized for whatever power output that you have. I don't know exactly what injectors you need to put in because I'm not hip on all the injector lengths for the different intake manifolds. But a Trailblazer SS is going to want a 90 millimeter throttle body or a 92 millimeter throttle body. So you're going to need that. And then the injectors would be sized for something that's going to make for, you'd want to size it for something that's like 500 horsepower unless you're going to run boost on it later on. It's not a bad idea to oversize the injectors anyway, because you're going to have it tuned. So when you have it tuned, it's easy to take fuel away. Todd, LQ4 stage 3 twin turbo cam, looking to make 1,000 horse for drag car. What turbos would you suggest? The first thing I would suggest is a smaller camshaft. But if you're going to use that on a 6-liter, it would work. It'll just be softer down low than it needs to be to make 1,000 horsepower. And for a single, I would recommend an S475, S480, or a VS Racing 7875 Gen 2 or 3 kind of thing. And if you're going to do twins, if that's what you want to do, two GT3582s would certainly do that. Can you do a video on how to measure ring gap? Yes. Yeah, at wide open throttle, the clutch most OEMs have the clutch disengage at wide open throttle for AC systems. A lot of electric hybrid systems have electric ACs, so the AC can run when the engine's off. That would make sense. Nimbly, just watch the 1500 horsepower, the blown and squeezeway. Is that the one where they ran the big block with the tunnel ram on it and then ran like an 871 on it, and then they ran nitrous and an E85 and stuff? I haven't watched the video, so I don't know what their assessment was. Manufacturer of the replacement rings I put in the 385 Series Ford, their big bore recommended 17 ring gap. 17 seems tight in a big block Ford for any application. What cam would you recommend for a stock bottom end 5.3 turbo build on a budget? A Trek Norris. If you want to go really budget, you could use a sloppy stage. I'd use a sloppy stage 1 over a sloppy stage 2. I don't know what the price difference is on those two. If you want to just do it the lowest price deal, that's what I would put in there. If it were me. I have an oil cooler on my 90 turbo Spirit and didn't notice much of a difference in oil temperature. Yeah, you do have to make sure that on the coolers that you have enough flow through the cooler to not get a pressure drop, for one thing. And then, does it have the flow and the cooling capacity? Just like when you look at an intercooler, it's the same thing. Richard, did you use the Cryo 2 system in a real-world in-car system with puller fans to control the CO2 to pass through the heat exchangers, or just on the dyno with no fans? The dyno has fans in it, but I didn't test it in a car. But because of the angle of attack from the cooler, the CO2, we didn't use CO2, we used nitrous. The nitrous is passing through the core. This is always the argument with air-to-air stuff too, is that, yeah, but you don't have a way to simulate 150 mile an hour airflow through the core. No, and your car is not going 150 miles an hour when it's leaving the line either. So at the very top of the RPM range, you're getting that, but through most of it, you're not. But that being said, I always thought it would be better. We normally try to hook up a really big fan through it, but I didn't do that on the cooler stuff. I have not started selling my cams, and I won't be doing that. Which is better for daily use? 487, 495, 212, 218, or a 525, 219, 225, 112. For a small block, 57, 88. I would say the idle is going to be better on the first cam. The power is going to be better on the second cam. Brett, where the heck is that? I can't even pronounce that word. Where is that? Butcher, you've done some endurance ice racing? I didn't even know that was a thing. I knew ice racing was a thing, but I didn't know that they did endurance racing. Oil squirters are definitely recommended. Those are a good idea, especially for endurance stuff. That's why we like the Hondas so much. And when we ran them successfully in like Motorola Cup and stuff, where you'd run 24-hour stuff, I think that's one of the reasons that they work so well, is because the oil squirters on the bottom of the piston kept Piston temperature, like pretty consistent, assuming that your oil temperature is good. Nimbly, I think that them struggling to make more than 12 pounds of boost, I think you're assuming that the boost and the power are related, but actually boost and power are on that application when you have a limited blower and lots of power are inversely related. So as you go up in power, the boost will come down when you spin the blower the same. So it's like putting, if you have that blower and you have it on a stock 454, the boost is going to be higher. But when you put that same blower at the same speed on a much more powerful combination, the boost will come down. So them not being able to build any more boost may be a function of them being very, very close to the flow limit of that supercharger. And then being able to make more power with the nitrous is not a function of the flow rate of the supercharger. In fact, whenever we run nitrous on stuff, the flow rate of that system goes down because we're replacing some of the airflow with nitrous. But when we're replacing it, we're getting a net gain because we have more oxygen molecules. So I would suspect that 871, even being a stripped kind of race blower, is at those kinds of power levels is getting up near the flow limit of the blower. That's what I would guess. Let's see. Not nice to know that I'm not the only one with a turbo spirit. Goal is to get mine in the 12s. Just waiting on more Dodge videos. It just needs a camshaft, an imported head, and more boost. One of the first things I did on my Jetta TDI was put a fan on the intercooler. No more heat soak. Ram truck. If you keep posting the same thing, you're going to get kicked off. Just a word of advice. Do you have any recommendations for cams on a Gen 6 big block with a factory head for street strip use? So looking at the combo, the 276 that you used in the past, but wanted to know what else you might suggest. Something in that range is fine. You're limited on coil bind clearance because you're going to have to change the spring package on it. And then you could go with a bigger cam than that with the available piston to valve clearance and get more power. But for streetability, something in that kind of range is going to be fine. So is there any mid-range throttle body that you recommend? Is this still about you should match if this is about the Trailblazer SS, you need a Trailblazer SS. The opening of that manifold is 90 something millimeters, 92 or so. And so you need a throttle body that matches that. That's what you want to do. You don't want to have a throttle body that's smaller than that, and you don't need a throttle body that's bigger than that, but you should match that size opening with the right size throttle body. Boost uses PSI, helping what you have to start with for a 463 valve. What rods and pistons would you recommend? Cam heads, but that's a lot of different questions. I have 3-valve stuff up. You can port the head on the 3-valve. It will help. There are lots of cams available. Comp has a bunch of them, depending on how you want to trade drivability and power. I don't know what boost you're using. Is it a blower? Is it a turbo? What is it? And how much power do you want to make? There's lots of questions there. Gene, would a 454, 218, 110 work? I don't know about the lift on that. I would need to check on the lift for that. There might be a spring package that you can put on that, but I would check retainer to seal clearance. If this question is for me, are you going to Ozarks Performance Expo? I don't know what that is, so the answer is probably no. Detonation is much harder on bearings than hitting a rev limiter. Although I would recommend not running a motor on the rev limiter either. Freya, I don't know what combination you're asking that turbo about. Getting a Spirit in the 12 should I wouldn't think so. That's a good motor that's in there. It should be able to make lots of power. I will not be at SEMA. Ram truck, your 220 cam is not a big cam. It would be low to middle of the road kind of cam. Because you talked about your big block project. Now you've been working on it, painting it recently, but it's being built? It's being built as a reproduction of the L78, the SS396 motor, the 375 horse factory 396, or in 65, it was rated at 425 horsepower on the Corvette. I want to do it to show that those are the same motor. And I also want to do it I want to find out what they really made, like I did with the small block. So I'm building a big block. I'm also building an LS6 big block, but don't tell anybody about that because it's top secret. But this 396 is the first one because I haven't ever put together a 396. I just think it would be cool. And I want to see what it does. I want to see how much power it actually makes when we run it on the engine dyno. 345 horsepower. You can determine whether or not that's a lot. You should put the motor in and drive it and see if you like it and see if it feels like it needs more power. Uh, 3,000 stall is more than enough for that motor Ram truck. Let's get some AMC motors on the dyno. I have a Pontiac 350 if that counts. And that was going to be my other question. If I have any Pontiac people here, Pontiac experts, I'm confused about. I want to take this 350 and build a reproduction of an HO 350. So I'm looking at the specs, and it says that this is 10.25 to 1. That they use the dash 48 head or the 48 head on it, which is a small chamber, big valve. And they're saying that it's like 66 to 68 cc's. But when you do the math on it, that and the displacement and a flat top piston doesn't come anywhere near that compression. So I don't know if they're wrong in their compression or it didn't use a flat top. Would they have used a dome piston on that? Because I thought that all the Pontiac stuff either had a flat top or a dish. I'm not a Pontiac expert, so somebody chime in if they know what's going on there. Trying to get 200 wheel horsepower out of a 1 liter Suzuki G10. I have 2 T3 compressor housings on the bench. 45 is what's going to be on the small side. 50 is on the big side. I think the turbo that I use it was either a GT20 or a GT23. And I did it so that it would purposely go over 200. We didn't ever get there when I was testing because I was running into the lack of tuning ability because I still had the vane meter on there. I didn't have a standalone, but I know that motor will go over that. We did 120 at the tire with the stock. I think it's an RB32 turbo in there, and that was as much as it would do. And so I know that we needed a bigger turbo. I tried also a factory turbo from a 1.8T VW application, a Golf, and that would definitely make more power. Obviously, it was bigger than the RB32 is, but the Garrett was definitely bigger and could put you up in that range. If you're trying to do that, I'm sure that you already have a camshaft for that. It definitely needs a camshaft, and a ported head would obviously help a lot. What's a quick trick for more compression on 80s big block, cheap domes from Speed Pro, or find a lower CC head? Both of those will work. You probably have, if it's an 80s big block, it probably has a 120 cc chamber head. There are lots of other smaller chamber heads. There's not a lot. If you want a stock one, you can go get a Gen 6 head. A Gen 6 head is going to be 102 cc's. So you'll go up more than a full point by doing that. That's a fairly easy deal. You can also, you can also change the piston from the flat top or the dish piston that might be in there to something that's like a 20 cc dome, which would be pretty common for that. Is Pontiac different than Buick? It is different than a Chevy. Remove the 350 and put a 400 in. Yeah, that's. I already ran the 400 though. A 2500 stall is fine for that small block Ram truck. I thought you asked if it was a 3000. Is it a 2.5 standalone, or did you buy forward motion computer? Is it stripped out? What turbo is it? Wyatt, you have a 4-bolt small block cast rotating assembly, ARP. Oh, a cast crank, cast rods with ARP, all Eagle stuff. So it has an Eagle rotating assembly, but it's cast. 40 over dish piston can run. You can easily run 500 horsepower with the turbo with that. You can do that with a motor that you just pulled from a wrecking yard without any problem. If you want, John, you want 600 wheel horsepower with a 2.6 liter blower on a 4.6 3-valve, I wouldn't even put cams in it. You're already going to be there using E85. How worthwhile are thinner head gaskets to increase compression on a Gen 6 big block? I don't think you're going to get very much from that. You just have to use the right head gasket to put the Gen 6 head on. Would you build a motor for me? No, thank you. Have you worked on UZ Lexus engines? I haven't, and I'd like to. I'd like to run those V8s and also the Nissan 5.6 stuff. A GT45 will work on a small block Chevy. You just need to have the exhaust correct for it. James, Richard, on some of your turbo engines, I see blow-offs on the intake and exhaust. They're not blow-offs. On a turbo application, you have wastegates on the exhaust that control the boost, and a blow-off valve or a compressor bypass valve on the discharge side. That just helps stops the buildup of pressure, the pressure spike that happens when you're boosting the motor and then you close the throttle valve. Like when we're done at the run, rev it all the way up to 6,500, and then we shut the throttle body or carburetor. And what that does is allows an escape route because all the air is still rushing in. And then when you close the throttle, it builds up a bunch of pressure, and that pressure will want to go back out the turbo and stop the turbo from spinning, which is bad. It will surge the turbo, and that just allows an escape route on the induction side. On the exhaust side, that's just controlling the boost. Gary, that's not entirely true. I do build motors for myself, but not for others. Admiral's back. Would be interesting to see you work on upgrading a UZ VK motor. I would like to do that, and as long as we have, I mean, as long as the Holly will run them or that MS3 Pro will run them, we basically need, with any new engine combination, we need a flywheel, bell housing. The motor mounts are not a problem. A harness and an ECU. And then with some of these motors, if they have drive-by-wire, that's pretty easily cured with a manual throttle body. That's easy to do. But variable cam oftentimes can be sometimes problematic, although the MS3 Pro was able to do that, to control that on the 4200. Cam has been reground to 222. Head has been ported. I'm curious why the lift is only 364 on the turbo combination. Have you heard of an Ecotech 1.4 liter? Yes. Nobody ever gave me ideas on using something other than the stock controller to control my Emmerich plates when I do go Holly. Don't want to delete them. Heavy car. That's just an on-off, right? For the controller. What is the solenoid that actuates that? Is it just a 12 volt or a 5 volt reference? I mean, you could use the nitrous output or something probably from the Holly, right? Just to do that. That shouldn't be too hard. Michael, I don't think that that's accurate. How much boost do I run on a stock 351 Cleveland? Is the motor running good now? If it's running good now, I would easily do, 7, 8, 10 pounds on it, long as the tune is right. Pretty sure Pontiac never had a dome piston. I didn't think so either. I thought flat tops were kind of the way to go. I didn't know if the flat top had, if it had a valve relief in it or multiple valve reliefs. I just wasn't sure. Because I've seen the dish versions, but not the flat top one. Sports. I don't know what the head gasket number is. I always refer to the Felpro catalog when I'm doing that. I read a lot of people try this with Felpro advice and ended up with water in the lifter valley. I thought that was a doable deal. The actuator pulls cables, but I want to control it with something other than the stock actuator if I can. So you said it's not easy to work with VVT. So do you say non-VVT engines are better to build? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that when I try to run, I don't ever run VVT motors on the engine dyno, other than some of the factory stuff that we controlled with factory ECUs. So if we've run VVT Coyote motors, and VVT works very well. It definitely adds power. With that stock camshaft, it definitely adds power. And we were able to control it because we ran a factory ECU. It was one of the few times that we ran a factory ECU. Same thing with the L83, the Gen 5 LT base motor. We ran it with a factory controls pack and the factory ECU, which is very rare, but we did that and that worked very well. We ran the 4200 Atlas motor with an MS3 Pro, which was able to control the VVT. The Holley that it's systems I normally use does not control VVT, at least the one that we were using on the motors that we were using it on. It's not better to build a motor without VVT. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. VVT works very well on lots of applications. As you get into bigger camshafts, you cannot swing the VVT very much, at least not with the existing available piston to valve clearance. So if you wanted to do that, you'd have to have, pistons with big valve reliefs in them to allow you to move the cam, to allow you to move a bigger cam around that has more duration in it. So it's all an adjustment. The Speedpro pistons are almost exactly like the factory TRW pistons. Are you talking about for the Pontiac? Lunch is over, back to work. Daryl, this is a weird question. If you have a hopped up engine running 940 boosted or 470 NA, switching from 94 octane down to 87 octane, would you predict 870 and 435? The NA motor would more than likely not lose very much power because depending on what compression it is and how you achieve that. 435 horsepower is not very much if you're talking about a typical like 5.3 LS. So 435 is a cammed stock one, which will run on 87 octane without any problem. At least the way that we run it on the dyno, it will run on 87 octane and make maximum power, I'm sure. So the gain would be less. I don't know going from 94 to 87 if you have to take an exact amount of timing that's going to lose 70 horsepower. There's no way for me to answer that unless we put the motor on the dyno and found out what the detonation threshold was. But my guess is, if your question is, you're going to lose more under boost than you will NA. Yeah, it's not going to be linear. The lift is limited to 364. Oh, that's lobe lift. Okay, because a factory cam core can only be your ground at that point before getting into the base of the cam. Okay, that makes sense. Is there, what is the rocker ratio? Like, what is the valve lift with that lobe lift? Maybe Richard will test a ported exhaust manifold versus a non-ported on the 2.2. So you want to see a ported factory one? Admiral, yes. When they do regrinds, you can weld them up and then cut them at the same base circle, and then you harden them again, or you can cut it down to a smaller base circle. Some OEMs have dual horsepower ranges for different octanes. Yeah, they do on the LT motor, whether you're running E85 or 91. Speed Pro shorten the skirts. Can locking VVT be beneficial? Well, it would be beneficial for not destroying all the valves when they hit the pistons. So it's definitely beneficial for that. and it has to be done, you either limit VVT when you're putting an aftermarket VVT cam in, you either limit it or stop it completely if you can't swing it very much because of the available piston to valve clearance. Normally, what happens when you eliminate VVT is you end up losing low speed power. Two more minutes, and we didn't have a poll. Somebody needed to remind me. You should do an L9H. Is that a 5.3? I think it's one of the. Oh, 6.2 L9H Gen 4. It's the same as every other 6.2. Right? Yeah. That's like a truck 6.2. That would be the same as every other 6.2 test motor that I have up on the dyno. Dan, is that a low buck Porsche transmission build? Admiral, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to achieve a broad power band and limit power up top, which is what a VVT that has a given amount of piston to valve clearance has? It would be really nice if you can have a giant camshaft that makes lots and lots of power up top and then swing it to help a little bit down low. It depends on if your camshaft needs are skewed more toward making lots of power and lots of RPM, or is it skewed the other way? Tom, you want me to put two M90s on an LS? That's big money, Dan. I was looking through your videos. Did you ever test a Cadillac supercharger on a 5.3? Yeah, on a 6.0 we tried it. 1.4 Ecotech Big Bang. That's not really on the list. Didn't Westech upgrade the ignition box on your dyno? From what to what? What are you talking about? And what do you mean by just? Did it happen between the last time I was there and right now? What about a 671 blower on an L36? I was thinking about putting a Kenny Bell on one of those again, but it really just needs a turbo. And it has that already. Junkyard Olds 455. That would be interesting if I had ever seen an Olds 455 in the junkyard, and I haven't yet. J37, no. I would do a J32 probably, maybe a J35. The J37s are still really expensive. My buddy Jimmy has a J32 swap in his NSX, which is working out really well. In fact, I have to send him a. You don't like that, Milo? What are you doing over there? I have to send him a bigger wastegate. Supercharged Gen 2 LT1. Every small block needs to have boost. Mark II head Geo Metro. Cam lifter valve, no rocker. I think that my lifter question or my rocker question was on the 2.2 Dodge. I want to see more 462 valve stuff. I haven't run a 462 valve in many years, maybe 10. I think I'd have to look back and see the last time I ran a 462 valve. Which small block not cast iron is best boosted? The factory never made aluminum small blocks, right? They're all cast iron blocks. And you can add boost to every small block ever made. And they like it. Admiral, you have a list of modular intake manifolds. Is it 2 valve? Is it 4 valve? Is it 3 valve? Is it V10? Yeah, I'm sure with you it's 6.2, right? I'm sure that there are a lot between the last time that I ran every one that I could get a hold of at the time that was 15 or 20 years ago and now. I'm sure a lot has happened since then. I know that the one that I'm really interested in is all of the Australian ones are really cool. All of the like Boss 290s and all those are really cool. The one that I would be interested in is, and the one that people are talking about is the Edelbrock one, because the Edelbrock one wasn't out when I did all the modular testing. I cut down a 2V aluminum truck manifold. Yeah, I said that. Kevin, you already posted that once. Why are you reposting? Oldsmobile made a bunch of 455s with extra nickel content for the race program in the 70s. Did they put them in production vehicles? And then can I find them in the wrecking yard? I've tested the Trick Flow and I've tested the Typhoon. I have not tested a Victor Jr. So you have a list of one that I haven't tested, which I already mentioned, which I circumvented you. Winning. #winning. You tested the track heat, not the street burner? There's 2 of them? Wow, I stand corrected. Is one of them a long runner one and one of them is a short runner one? Boosting through a carburetor, is there a methodology for getting it to run well? Do you mean, is there a tuning sequence that you would use to do it? Yeah, we would try boost on it and see what it does and then adjust it accordingly. I normally start with, on the CSU carburetor, I start with just stabilizing the boost reference power valves at some position. Usually go by Kevin's recommendation to start with. And then we start playing with jetting first. And then we start adjusting the boost reference power valves to get it to do what we want it to do. Zach, moonshine conversion is not going to get very good fuel mileage. I do need to do a draw through turbo. I need to put that on the list. I'm making a list for the test that I want to do this month. And since I'm going to do a draw on the 2.2, since I'm going to do a draw through turbo on that, it's going to be a throttle body. There would be no reason that I couldn't put a carburetor there instead of the throttle body, right? Sports Fab, yours will be the last question. I have to get going. When choosing camshaft, what duration differences do you like for keeping low speed compression up for the street, but still providing good high speed? I don't look at the difference between the intake and exhaust duration spread first. I look at the cam size first, which for me is intake duration. That's what I would choose to decide on whether it's a truck kind of like RV style camshaft or it's a more racy kind of performance camshaft. I'd look at the intake duration, and then I would almost never run a single pattern cam because I'm philosophically opposed to single pattern cams. I would run a dual pattern camshaft, and then I would look at all of the data results that I have and pick the camshaft that makes the power curve that I want in the RPM range that I want. Have you ever done testing between, and I know I said I was going to go, you ever do testing between phenolic spacers between upper and lower manifolds? Yes. And it doesn't change the temperature of the air going through the motor. What it does do to a minor extent, depending on how thick it is it changes the runner length. But even that, a quarter of an inch, or even if it was a half inch, that change in runner length, usually compared to as a percentage change to how much runner length you already have, like on a 5-liter Mustang or whatever, is not a significant change in the shift in power. Use a 1-inch thick spacer with my LSJ supercharger setup. The spacing of plenum volume, I haven't seen do anything. And spacers for people that are trying, it's like trying to wrap your inlet tube and stuff to make the heat not go in there. I haven't seen that. Blown V twin, I'm assuming. The RPM limit on the stock short block is not the short block. It's always the valve train. I know 8, a draw through carburetor 2.2 needs to happen, right? I can put a carburetor there. And because I would have an elbow on the turbo, any sort of carburetor with adapter would work there. So we could make that work. And then I would just not fuel the injectors and we could just run the EFI to control the timing. And on that note, Milo's time to go, right? Yeah. Milo's in agreement. Thank you guys all for showing up. Go get your projects done, and I will see you all tonight.